You know that moment when your whole world goes quiet? When the phone in your hand feels heavier than a stone? That was the moment I realized my son had taken every single dollar I owned. I'm Eleanor Price, but everyone calls me Ellie. I'm 68 years old, and I've lived a simple life on the south side of Los Angeles. I've cleaned houses since I was 14, raised one boy on my own, saved every penny I could. I thought love and hard work would protect me. I was wrong. That morning started like any other. The kettle hissed. The radio played soft blues. I sat in my old cloth armchair, the same one I bought when Jackson turned 7, and opened my banking app. I almost dropped the phone. Available balance, $0. At first, I thought maybe the bank system was down. I blinked twice, rubbed my eyes, refreshed the screen. Still zero. My hands began to shake. Not from age, but from the kind of fear that starts in your stomach and climbs to your throat. I called the bank. A robot answered first. Then a young woman came on the line. Her voice was polite, almost bored. She said the movements were made online. Large transfers. More than $80,000. All of it. Every bit of my life's work. Where did the money go? I whispered. She paused, typing. Then she said the words that split me open. All funds were transferred to an account under the name Jackson Arthur Price. My son. The world around me went still. The clock ticked. The fridge hummed. A light bulb buzzed in the kitchen. Outside, the ice cream truck played its song like it didn't know my heart had just cracked in two. I hung up without saying a word. I sat there, the phone still warm in my hand, staring at nothing. Then my old landline rang. It rarely rings anymore. I picked it up slowly. Ellie, honey, did you see your Jackson's Instagram? It was my neighbor Doris, her voice high and full of gossip. He's in Rome, eating fancy food with his wife Tanya and her mama. They look like movie stars. Rome. My son was in Rome. With my money. I thanked Doris and hung up. My knees felt weak, so I sat back down. I opened Instagram for the first time in months. There he was, my Jackson, smiling in a white shirt, a glass of wine in his hand. Behind him, Tanya and Rhonda posed like queens. The caption read, Rome, my new beginning. I deserve this. Underneath, Tanya had commented, thanks for everything, Mama-in-law Moneybag. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then I locked the phone and set it aside. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat very still. Something inside me changed in that silence. People think anger comes with noise. Sometimes it comes with peace. A cold, quiet kind of peace that sits heavy in the chest. That night I boiled chamomile tea and tried to think. How could the boy I raised alone, the boy I carried on my back while cleaning rich people's floors, do this to me? I thought of every meal I skipped so he could eat. Every Christmas I worked late so he could have a gift. Every prayer I said asking God to keep him safe. Then I smiled, just a little. It wasn't madness. It was realization. If my love made him this careless, my silence would teach him what love really costs. I opened my old recipe notebook and wrote a single line. He took my money, but he also took my mercy. Now it's my turn to be quiet. The next morning, I went about my chores like nothing had happened. Swept the porch, fed the stray cat that visits me every dawn. The sun rose like it always does, but everything felt different. The world looked sharper, clearer. Maybe pain cleans the eyes. By noon, Doris came over with a pecan pie. She always bakes when something dramatic happens. Ellie, don't let this break you. Jackson will come to his senses, she said, pouring coffee. I smiled. Do you think children ever regret what they do, Doris? She nodded fast. Oh, sure. They always do when their mama is gone. Her words sat between us like a shadow. I looked out the window. A bus passed. A child laughed on the street. Life kept moving, but my mind was stuck on one sentence, when their mama is gone. Well, I said softly, maybe it's time for him to miss me while I'm still alive. That night, I wrote again in my notebook, when a mother stops crying, the world should be afraid. The next week, I found courage to face the truth. I went to the bank in person. The marble floors shined like mirrors. The young man behind the counter looked at me like I was invisible. When I told him about the transfers, he shrugged and gave me forms. So many forms. One line asked, "Do you wish to file a fraud claim?" I stared at it for a long time. Fraud. Such a clean word for such a dirty act. I signed, but my hand didn't shake. It was steady, almost calm. On my way home, I passed a family eating ice cream together. The father lifted his daughter, spun her around. For a moment, I saw Jackson as a boy, his laughter, his small hands reaching for me. Then the image disappeared. Love is cruel like that. It lets you remember just enough to hurt. That night, I opened a drawer and found an old photo album. There was Jackson in his school uniform, missing a tooth, holding a tiny soccer trophy. Each picture felt like a question I couldn't answer. What went wrong? When did love turn into shame? I closed the album and whispered, "You were my reason for living, baby. Now you'll be my reason to fight." A few days later, I went to see Walter, my old neighbor and first love. He's a retired lawyer now, living alone with dusty books and a heart too big for his body. When he opened the door, he looked surprised. "Ellie, it's been years. I need help, Walter." He gestured me in and made tea. I handed him my bank papers. He read for a long time, muttering to himself. Finally, he said, "Your son put your name on a joint account as guarantor. The signature isn't yours. It's forged." I stared at the paper. My own name, shaking and wrong. "He forged my signature?" "Yes," Walter said quietly. "They've been withdrawing money for months." The room spun for a moment. I felt sick, not because of the money, because of the betrayal. I stood up. "Thank you, Walter." "Ellie, wait. What are you going to do?" "Nothing. Not yet." He looked worried, but I walked out with my head high. That night, I did not sleep. I sat by the window and watched the city lights fade. I realized something simple and terrible. My son didn't just take my money. He took the part of me that believed in him. The next morning, I made a plan. I called the bank manager directly. I requested copies of every transaction, every document. He tried to brush me off until I mentioned the word lawyer. His tone changed. 2 days later, I received a package, pages and pages of numbers and signatures, each one a piece of evidence against my own blood. I spent the whole night reading them with a magnifying glass. I marked dates with a red pen, circled amounts, wrote notes in the margins. The next morning, my eyes hurt, but my heart felt steady. I was no longer a mother crying over loss. I was a woman preparing for war. A week passed. I kept silent. I acted normal. I cooked for myself, swept the porch, chatted with Doris. Inside, I was building a storm. Then one evening, I found something else. While moving my armchair to clean underneath, I saw a torn plastic bag tucked beneath the leg. Inside was a white envelope. I almost threw it away, but a voice inside me said, "Look." I opened it. It was a document, a copy of a will. It said that in case of my death, my house and savings would go to Jackson. At the bottom was my forged signature again. I sat on the floor and stared at it. My heart beat slow and loud. He had planned to own my house before I even died. I called Walter. He arrived in an hour, read the document, and shook his head. "This isn't just wrong, Ellie. It's dangerous. If he filed this, you could lose everything." I nodded. "He wanted to kill me on paper." Walter looked at me carefully. "Ellie, what are you going to do?" I smiled for the first time in days. "Bury him, but awake." That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from pain, but from clarity. For the first time in my life, I felt no fear. I felt free. He took everything material I had. Now I had nothing left to lose. And that's the most powerful place a person can be. I closed my eyes and thought of my boy as a child, his tiny hand holding mine. Then I thought of the man he had become. And I made a promise to myself, if he could betray me in silence, I'll teach him in silence too. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I boiled water, tied my scarf, and looked at the mirror. My reflection was calm, strong. For the first time in years, I saw a woman ready to fight back. I didn't know that within days, a doctor would give me news that would change everything, news that would turn my revenge into something much deeper than justice. 3 mornings after I found that forged will, the phone rang. It was the clinic where I sometimes went for checkups. "Miss Eleanor, could you come in today? The doctor wants to see you." I felt my stomach twist. People don't call you in for good news. Still, I put on my best scarf and walked there. I wanted to walk, not ride. I needed the air to clear my thoughts. When I entered Dr. Evans' office, he smiled, but the corners of his eyes didn't. He shuffled papers, looked up, and sighed. "Ellie," he said softly, "we redid your tests. The results aren't good." He paused. "You have leukemia. It's advanced." I stared at a spot on the wall, a little picture of a bird flying over water. I didn't cry. He kept talking, words like treatment, chemo, aggressive, expensive, uncertain. Then he stopped, waiting for me to say something. "How long?" I asked. He hesitated. 6 months, maybe a little more. 6 months. Half a year. 180 days to breathe, think, and finish what I'd started. I smiled, maybe too calmly. "That's enough time," I said. He blinked. "Enough for what?" "For everything I still have to do." I stood up, thanked him, and left. Outside, the world looked sharper again, the bus engines louder, the light brighter. Funny how death can make life look so clear. At home, I boiled tea and sat at the kitchen table. I stared at the steam until it disappeared. I whispered, "So that's how much time you've given me, God. Then I'll use every second." I pulled out my red notebook, the new one I'd bought after the forgery. On the first page I wrote, "I have 6 months to make things right. 6 months to remind my son who I am." The next day, I went to Walter's apartment. He was reading a newspaper, glasses low on his nose. When he saw my face, he knew. "I'm sick," I said. "The clock is running." He closed the paper slowly. "How bad?" 6 months. He looked down, then back at me. "Then we'd better not waste a single day." We started with the bank. Walter filed an elder abuse complaint. He used every favor, every contact he had left from his years as a lawyer. The bank froze the joint account temporarily. It was small progress, but it was something. I also went to the property office. We confirmed that my house was still under my name. No transfer, no co-ownership. Jackson's forged will hadn't gone through. That gave me relief, like breathing clean air after being underwater too long. But justice on paper wasn't enough. I wanted him to feel it, not just lose money, lose certainty, lose control, lose the comfort of thinking I'd never fight back. At night, I couldn't sleep. So I'd walk around the house, touching the furniture, the walls. Everything I owned carried my fingerprints, my sweat. I remembered scrubbing other people's floors to afford these walls. I remembered telling little Jackson stories to make him laugh while I ironed shirts. And now the same boy had tried to steal my roof. Sometimes I wondered if I'd spoiled him with love. Maybe my kindness had turned into his weapon. But regret changes nothing. Action does. So I planned. 2 weeks later, Walter helped me fill forms for an international alert. It's a quiet legal step that freezes certain transfers if elder financial abuse crosses borders. Jackson was in Italy, so it applied. The bank couldn't touch him there, but it could wait for him here. When Walter filed it, he looked at me and said, "You're terrifying when you're calm." I smiled. Mothers always are when they stop begging. That night, I wrote again in my notebook, "Sometimes the only thing stronger than love is the silence that follows it." Meanwhile, on social media, new photos appeared. Jackson and Tanya in front of the Coliseum. Jackson holding a plate of pasta with gold flakes. Rhonda posing with sunglasses bigger than her face. They looked like royalty, and all I could think was royalty on borrowed coins. Doris showed me the pictures. Ellie, can you believe this? He's living the dream. I looked at her phone and said quietly, dreams built on stolen sleep always end in nightmares. A few days later, I felt weak. The illness had started whispering in my bones, but I didn't stop moving. I cooked small meals, cleaned slowly, kept my mind busy. Walter brought soup sometimes. Brenda from next door checked in with pills. They both knew, but never said, "You're dying." They said, "You're fighting." And that made it easier. One afternoon, Walter knocked with excitement. They froze the international funds. The account Jackson used is under review. He'll find out soon. I nodded, breathing carefully. So the game begins. That night, I imagined him trying to pay for dinner and his card declining. Maybe Tanya would roll her eyes. Maybe Rhonda would laugh. Maybe for the first time, he'd feel small. Not because I wished him pain, but because he needed it. Sometimes life only teaches through humiliation. A week later, I went back to Dr. Evans. He asked if I'd reconsider chemo. "No," I said. "I'm not dying in a hospital bed. I'm dying on my terms." He looked sad, but I didn't want pity. I told him, "I've cleaned too many rich people's floors to die under white lights. I'll die where I lived, on my own ground." He didn't argue. He just nodded. And before I left, he said softly, "You remind me of my mother." That was the nicest thing anyone had said in a long time. Back home, I lit a candle and prayed, not for healing, but for clarity. I wanted to finish this story with grace. If my death had to come, it would find me standing. I spent the next mornings writing letters. One to the bank manager, thanking him for cooperating. One to the police officer assigned to the case. And one to Jackson. I didn't plan to send his letter yet. I just wrote, "You were my miracle and my mistake." Walter suggested I rest. "Ellie, revenge eats energy." "I'm not seeking revenge," I told him. "I'm setting balance." He smiled sadly. "Balance can look a lot like revenge from the outside." "Then let them look," I said. Meanwhile, across the ocean, my son's perfect world began to crack. I didn't know it yet, but later Walter showed me the reports. The bank had flagged his transfers as suspicious. His card stopped working in Rome. Tanya yelled at him in the street, called him a fool. Rhonda packed her bags and left for Spain. He tried to call me, but I didn't answer. Silence was my new language. Days turned into weeks. My body grew weaker, but my will grew harder. I'd wake at dawn, watch the sun rise over the cracked street and whisper, "One more day, one more chance to finish." One morning, I opened my eyes and felt peace. I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I called Walter. "I'm ready to file the official charges." He came over with forms and coffee. We sat at my kitchen table like two soldiers planning the last battle. He read the statement out loud. "Victim of forged signature, unauthorized transfers, attempted property fraud." When he finished, he looked at me. "Sign here, Ellie." I took the pen. My hand trembled slightly, but I managed to write my name, clearly, firmly. For the first time, my signature didn't feel like a servant's mark. It felt like power. Later that day, I visited Brenda. She made lemon cookies and poured milk. "Do you think he'll ever change?" I asked. "People only change when they lose everything," she said. "Then maybe that's what he needs." I stayed quiet for a while. Then I whispered, "I'm scared, Brenda." "Of what?" "Of dying before he understands." She touched my hand gently. "Then write it down. Leave him words that outlive you." That night, I opened the red notebook and wrote, "If I don't live to see him break, I'll live to see him learn, through every echo I leave behind." The days blurred together after that. I moved slower. Some mornings I couldn't hold a cup, but I kept writing. Letters, notes, memories, pieces of myself scattered on paper. And then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed. A foreign number. I answered without speaking. There was silence first, then a voice I hadn't heard in months. Mom, it's me. My heart stopped. Jackson? Yeah, something happened. They froze everything. Tanya's gone. Rhonda, too. They say it's because of you. What did you do? I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. I didn't take anything from you, son. I just stopped you from taking more from me. He started crying. Mom, please. They want to arrest me. I have nowhere to go. I whispered, now you know how it feels. Please help me. Learn, I said, and hung up. I sat in silence for a long time afterward. The kettle whistled, but I didn't move. I wasn't happy. I wasn't proud, but I felt the balance shift. That night, I couldn't sleep. So I wrote him another letter, my real one this time. It began, My dearest Jackson, you are my everything. I gave you my blood, my youth, my peace. But you chose greed over grace. I hope someday you understand that love without respect becomes pain. I sealed it and placed it inside the red notebook for when the time came. Weeks passed. Rumors reached me through Walter. Jackson was returning to the U.S. to face investigation. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt tired. Justice, it seems, weighs almost as much as grief. Still, I wasn't done. There was one last thing I wanted, to look him in the eye. Not as a mother, but as a woman who had finished her fight. Walter arranged it. He spoke to a contact at the American Embassy. If I could travel, they'd allow me to witness his statement. He warned me it would be hard on my health. I said, so is breathing, Walter, but I keep doing it. He smiled, the kind of smile that hides tears. The day before the flight, I packed one small bag. A scarf, my notebook, and a photo of Jackson as a child, missing a tooth, holding that soccer trophy. I looked at it one last time before placing it in the envelope with my letter. As I zipped the bag, I whispered, this ends where it began, with us. The night was quiet. The wind moved through the cracks in the window like a soft song. I sat in my armchair, hands folded, heart steady. Tomorrow, I would see my son again. Tomorrow, the circle would close. I didn't know that the next time I saw Jackson, he wouldn't be the proud man who left me behind. He'd be broken, digging, and I'd have to decide whether a mother's love could forgive what a woman's heart could not. The plane hummed softly under my feet. Walter sat beside me, reading paperwork he prepared for the embassy meeting. I stared out the window. Clouds moved like slow ghosts beneath us. My body was tired, but my mind was sharper than ever. I wasn't traveling for pleasure. I was traveling for closure. I thought about Jackson somewhere on this same sky route, flying home to face the mess he'd made. Was he scared? Angry? Did he blame me for his downfall the same way he once blamed me for being poor? I pressed my hand over my chest. The sickness lived there now, heavy and quiet. Each heartbeat felt like a countdown. When the plane landed in Rome, I whispered to myself, this is not revenge. This is a lesson. At the airport, Walter handled the documents. He'd arranged everything with a consular officer named Martin, a kind man who had once been the son of a single mother, too. When he saw me, he said softly, Miss Price, I read your case file. You're remarkable. I smiled faintly. No, son. I'm just a woman who stopped apologizing. He led us through the embassy's white hallways. They smelled of paper and polish. At the end of the corridor was a small waiting room. Metal chairs, cold air, silence thick as fog. They'll bring your son in soon, Martin said. You can observe, but please don't interrupt the questioning. I nodded. I didn't come to talk. I came to listen. The door opened. Jackson walked in. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. His hair was uncombed. His eyes were swollen, red around the edges. He looked older than his 30-something years, like guilt had carved lines into his face. He wore a wrinkled shirt and no confidence. When he saw me, his steps faltered. Mom, he whispered. I kept my face calm. Sit down, Jackson. He hesitated, then obeyed. The young lawyer beside him adjusted his papers nervously. The room felt smaller, heavier. Martin explained the procedure. Jackson needed to sign documents confirming he'd used my account for personal transfers and that all funds had been returned to investigation custody. Jackson looked lost. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he said. "I thought I'd pay it back." His voice broke. I felt something twist inside me. Once, that same voice had asked for bedtime stories and goodnight kisses. Now it begged for mercy. Martin cleared his throat. "Please sign here." Jackson picked up the pen. His hands trembled. When he pressed it to paper, I saw the same signature that had once been forged next to mine. This time, it was real. When the questioning ended, the lawyer and Martin left us alone for a few minutes. Silence filled the space again. He looked up at me, eyes full of tears. "Mom," he said softly, "I don't know when I became this person. I wanted to hold him. Every instinct in me screamed to comfort him like before, but I stayed still. Maybe when you stopped seeing people as hearts and started seeing them as wallets," I said quietly. He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. Are you sorry you hurt me or sorry you got caught?" He couldn't answer. "Do you know what hurt the most, Jackson?" I asked. He looked at me silent. It wasn't the money. It was realizing that I raised a man who could smile while killing his mother on paper. He covered his face with both hands. "I was stupid." "Yes, you were. But stupidity stops being an excuse after childhood." He dropped his hands and whispered, "I deserve everything that's happening." "Then learn from it," I said. Walter came back to escort me out. Before I left, I handed Jackson a yellow envelope. Inside were the photos from his childhood and a short letter. He didn't open it. He just held it like something sacred. I said, "These are reminders of who you used to be. Find that boy again before it's too late." Then I walked away. Outside, the sunlight blinded me for a moment. The wind was cool, smelling faintly of rain and stone. Walter touched my shoulder. "You handle that better than most saints." "I'm no saint," I said. "Just tired." That night I lay awake listening to the city sounds. Scooters, laughter, church bells far away. Rome was beautiful, but beauty means nothing when your heart is heavy. I whispered to the dark, "Lord, keep him safe. Teach him without destroying him completely." And for the first time in months, I felt sleep come gently. The next morning, Walter told me we'd be flying back to the States soon. But I wasn't ready yet. "I want to walk through the city," I said. He worried. "Your body can't handle much walking. My soul needs it more than my body fears it." So we went. Cobblestone streets under my old shoes, the smell of coffee from every corner cafe. Tourists laughing, couples taking photos, a little girl chasing pigeons. For a few minutes, I let the world be beautiful again. Then we reached the old stone fountain in the square. I tossed a single coin into it and whispered for a second chance, not for me, but for him. That evening, there was a knock on my hotel door. It was Jackson. His eyes looked hollow. He stood there like a child who'd lost his way home. "Can I come in?" he asked. I nodded. He sat on the chair near the window, twisting his fingers. "I read your letter," he said. I waited. "It broke me." He looked at me. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know that when I took that money, I thought I was helping Tanya start her business. I thought she loved me." "Did she?" I asked. He shook his head. "She left the same night the bank froze the account. Said she never wanted a man who brings bad luck." I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any lecture. He stayed quiet for a long time, then whispered, "Mom, I want to come home." I looked out the window at the fading sky. "Home isn't a place you walk into, Jackson. It's something you earn back." He nodded, tears falling silently. "I'll do whatever it takes." "Then start by standing on your own feet," I said. "Stop expecting others to fix what you broke." He wiped his face. "Will you ever forgive me?" I already did. But forgiveness doesn't rebuild trust. It just removes poison from the soul. He stared at the floor. You really are stronger than I ever knew." "No," I said softly. "You just never looked closely enough." 2 days later, we flew home. Walter helped with the luggage. Jackson sat a few rows behind me on the plane. He didn't try to talk. Maybe he understood that some conversations need silence between them to mean something. When we landed in Los Angeles, I felt the familiar air, the smell of asphalt and fried food, the hum of buses. I was home, but home felt emptier now. Walter drove me back to my little house. Before he left, he said, "You know, Ellie, I've known you my whole life. You've always been strong. But this is something else." I smiled faintly. When you run out of tears, strength is all that's left. He nodded and left. Inside the house, everything was as I'd left it. The photos, the armchair, the old clock ticking. I sat down, breathing deeply. Then I saw the bag Jackson had left on my porch. It was filled with donuts, still fresh. He must have come earlier that day before I turned. I smiled sadly. Donuts have been our thing when he was little. Every Friday, after school, I'd buy him one glazed ring. Maybe this was his way of saying sorry. I placed them on the table and whispered, "Baby steps, Jackson. Baby steps." Weeks passed. I grew weaker. The cancer moved faster than I expected. Sometimes my hands trembled so much I couldn't hold a spoon, but I refused to give up my routines. Every morning, I swept the porch. Every evening, I wrote in the red notebook. One afternoon, Doris came by. She looked at me worried. "Ellie, you need help. You're too thin." "I have help," I said. "I have peace." She didn't understand, but she hugged me anyway. Sometimes love doesn't need understanding. Jackson started coming by quietly. He never knocked. He just left things on the porch, flowers, food, sometimes a note with no name. I never called out. I never opened the door. But I saw him from the window, and that was enough. One evening, I found a note tucked under the donuts box. It said, "I'm trying, Mom. I really am." I smiled and pressed it to my heart. Then one morning there was another knock. This time I opened the door. Jackson stood there holding groceries. He looked cleaner, calmer. His eyes were still tired, but softer. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Hi, Jackson." He hesitated. "Can I come in this time?" I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, looking around like the house itself was judging him. "It looks smaller," he said. "No, son. You just got used to big spaces that weren't yours." He nodded. We sat at the table. He unpacked vegetables, eggs, and a small cake. I thought we could eat together. It was quiet for a while, but it wasn't uncomfortable. He talked about looking for work, trying to pay back what he could. I listened. I didn't scold. Just hearing his honesty felt like sunlight after a long storm. After dinner, he washed the dishes. I watched him, smiling. When he finished, he turned and said, "I don't know if I'll ever deserve your kindness." I said, "It's not about deserving, Jackson. It's about learning." He nodded. "I'll come again next week if that's okay." "Next week's not promised to anyone," I said. "So come tomorrow." He laughed softly. "Tomorrow it is." He kissed my forehead before leaving. His lips trembled against my skin. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I woke up early. I made coffee, opened the window, and watched the sunrise paint the sky pink. The birds sang like they were telling me, "You did it, Ellie. You made it right." But the pain in my chest reminded me I was running out of time. Still, I smiled. I'd seen my son come home. That was more than most broken mothers ever got. I wrote another page in the red notebook. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting the knife. It's about showing you survived the wound. Over the next days, Jackson came daily. He fixed the leaky faucet, painted the porch, repaired my chair. Every small act was a piece of redemption. I could see the guilt fading, replaced by humility. Sometimes we sat without words, just sipping tea. Other times, he'd tell me stories from his childhood, how he used to hide cookies under his pillow. We both laughed. For a while, it felt like time had gone backward, back to when love was simple. But I knew better. I could feel death walking closer every night. I didn't fear it. I just wanted to leave everything tidy. So one afternoon, I called Walter and Brenda. We sat together in my living room. I handed Walter a sealed envelope. "If something happens to me, give this to Jackson," I said. He didn't ask what was inside. He just nodded. Then I looked at Brenda. "Promise me you remind him that kindness isn't weakness." She smiled sadly. "I will." That night, after they left, I sat by the window again. Jackson was across the street talking to a neighbor's kid, showing him how to ride a bike. I watched him, proud and peaceful. He'd finally become the man I hoped he'd be. It just took losing everything to find himself. I whispered, "Thank you, Lord. That's enough for me." The room grew darker. The air felt soft. And somewhere deep inside, I felt the beginning of goodbye. That night, I didn't know my body was already saying its last goodbyes. The next sunrise would bring silence to my house and a lesson my son would never forget. The air felt heavy when I woke before dawn. There was a strange stillness inside me, like the quiet that comes before a storm. I tried to sit up, but pain shot through my chest. It was sharp, but calm somehow, like my body was finally ready to rest. I reached for my red notebook on the bedside table. It was open to the last page I'd written. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting the knife. It's about showing you survived the wound. I smiled. My handwriting was shaky, but the words still felt strong. Outside, the first light of morning crept through the window. The walls glowed faintly gold. I could hear children laughing in the distance and the faint whistle of the bakery truck. Life was moving on, as it should. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for giving me enough time to see my boy try again." When I opened my eyes again, it was bright. Jackson was standing at my door. He was holding a small bouquet of wildflowers and a cup of coffee from the corner shop. "Morning, Mom," he said softly. "Morning, baby," I answered. He set the flowers in a jar and the coffee on the table. Then he sat beside my bed, his face full of quiet worry. "You okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," I said, though I wasn't. He frowned. "You sure?" I smiled. "I've been worse." He chuckled a little, shaking his head. Then he said something that made my heart ache and heal at the same time. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what I did, about who I was. And I realized something. I thought success was money, but success is peace. You had peace all along, and I never understood it." I looked at him and felt tears gather. "Peace doesn't come easy, son. You have to walk through fire to find it." He nodded, looking down. "Well, I want to be the kind of man you can be proud of." "I already am," I said. "You just had to find your way back." He smiled, but his eyes were wet. He took my hand. "I love you, Mom." "I know," I whispered. "Now go fix that old porch light like you promised." He laughed and kissed my forehead before heading outside. I watched from the window as he climbed the ladder, fixing wires, humming softly. For the first time in years, our home felt whole again. The rest of that day passed gently. The sun warmed the curtains, and the radio played an old soul song I loved. I cooked lunch with Jackson, nothing fancy, just rice, beans, and fried okra. He told stories while I sat and listened. His voice reminded me of when he was little, talking about school, about dreams. I laughed more that day than I had in months. But as the evening came, the pain returned. It crawled up my spine, steady and deep. I didn't tell him. Mothers don't ruin moments with their pain. Instead, I watched him wash dishes, humming the same tune his father used to sing. When he finished, he turned and said, "You know, Mom, when I was a kid, I thought you were invincible." I smiled faintly. Maybe I was. He laughed, walked over, and hugged me. I could feel his heartbeat. Strong, steady, alive. That was enough. That night, after he left, I sat in my rocking chair and opened the notebook again. The red cover had faded a little from being touched so much. I wrote slowly, "If tomorrow doesn't come for me, let this book speak. Let my words hold him when my arms can't." I placed the pen down, folded my scarf neatly, and leaned back. The wind outside rustled the curtains like a lullaby. The smell of the flowers Jackson brought filled the room. I felt my heart slow, not painfully, just gently. And then everything went quiet. The next thing I remember wasn't pain. It was light. Soft, endless light. I didn't hear my own breath anymore, only peace. But down below, in that small house on the south side of Los Angeles, my son came knocking the next morning. He had a box of warm bread and a new bulb for the kitchen light. "Mom, open up," he called. No answer. He knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. He opened the door. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The flowers were still fresh on the table. The teacup from last night was half full. And there I was, sitting in my chair, head resting gently to one side, my red notebook on my lap. He froze. The world seemed to stop with him. "Mom?" he whispered. He touched my hand. It was cold. His breath caught, and for the first time since he was a boy, he fell to his knees and cried like a child. Neighbors came running when they heard the scream. Brenda was first. She called Walter, who came within minutes. They moved quietly, respectfully. They didn't try to move me right away. They let Jackson hold my hand, let him talk to me as if I could still hear. "Mom, please." I wasn't ready. I still had things to say. Brenda put a hand on his shoulder. She knew Jackson. She heard them before you said them. Walter wiped his glasses and cleared his throat. "She left something for you." He pointed to the red notebook still on my lap. Jackson picked it up slowly, his fingers trembling. On the last page was an envelope with his name written in my shaky handwriting. He opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a letter, short and simple. "My son, love is not demanded, it is given. If you have learned that, you are not lost anymore. Don't look for me when I'm gone. Look for me in the good you choose to do. That will be my peace." Tears stained the paper before he even finished reading. The neighbors helped prepare the house. Doris brought flowers from her garden. Children from down the street drew little cards and placed them near the door. Brenda lit candles and played soft music. There was no expensive coffin, no big ceremony, just warmth, love, and peace. Jackson stayed the whole night beside me. He didn't leave, didn't eat, didn't speak much. He just sat whispering, "I'm sorry, Mom. Thank you. I love you." The next day, Walter arranged the burial. It was simple, just like I wanted. A small wooden box, a patch of grass under a big tree. No speeches, no fancy flowers. Only the people who truly loved me. As they lowered me down, Jackson knelt and placed the red notebook inside the coffin beside me. He whispered, "You'll never be forgotten, Mom. Not ever." Then he stood up, his eyes red but clear. He looked around at the crowd, then at the sky. For the first time, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, purpose. After the funeral, people stayed for hours sharing stories. Doris talked about my pies. Brenda talked about how I once helped her pay rent when she was short. Walter told the kids that I taught him more about courage than law school ever did. Everyone laughed and cried together. Jackson stayed behind after everyone left. He sat on the grass, talking to the air. "I thought money would make me feel important," he said. "But you knew the truth. It's love that keeps us rich." The sun set slowly behind the trees. He stayed there until darkness covered everything. Then he got up and walked home, our home. When he opened the door, the house smelled the same, lavender, old wood, and memories. He sat in my rocking chair, the one that still creaked the same way. He closed his eyes and imagined my voice reading stories to him like I used to. He could almost hear me say, "Don't stop now, baby. Keep walking. Life's not over." Weeks passed. The house no longer felt empty. It felt alive again, but in a different way. Jackson began fixing everything that had broken over the years. He painted the walls, replaced the squeaky floorboards, even planted flowers by the window. He said it helped him feel close to me. One day, Brenda stopped by with soup. She looked around the freshly painted living room and smiled. "You're doing good, Jackson." "I'm trying," he said. "She'd want it this way." She nodded. "She'd also want you to live, not just remember." Those words stayed in his mind for days. Slowly, he began stepping out again. He found a small accounting job in town, nothing fancy, but honest work. He worked long hours, saved every penny, and even volunteered at the community center on weekends. The kids there reminded him of himself, lost, hopeful, in need of guidance. He taught them basic math and how to open savings accounts. Sometimes he told them stories about a woman who never gave up on her son. They didn't know her name, but they loved her already. Every evening, he came home, cooked simple meals, and sat by my photo on the shelf. He talked to me about his day, about the kids, about life, and somehow he always felt like I was listening. Sometimes late at night, he'd hear the old rocking chair creak even though no one was sitting in it. Did it scare him? He'd smile and whisper, "I know you're here, Mom." One evening, after work, Jackson came home to find a letter on the doorstep. It was from Walter. Inside was a small key and a note. "She wanted you to have this. Look under the floorboard near the chair." He hurried inside, lifted the floorboard carefully, and found a small wooden box wrapped in a faded scarf. Inside was a ring, my engagement ring, and a folded piece of paper. The note said, "This was my last treasure. I sold it once to give you life. Now I give it back to you so you never forget its value. Not in money, but in meaning. Protect love, Jackson. It's rarer than gold." He held the ring in his palm and cried quietly. He slipped it on a chain around his neck and never took it off again. Months passed. Seasons changed. The flowers outside bloomed bright yellow. The house felt full of laughter again, not the loud kind, but the peaceful kind. Sometimes Jackson would catch himself smiling for no reason. He'd whisper, "You'd like this, Mom." And I believe somehow he was right. A year later, Jackson stood at my grave with a bouquet of lilies. He knelt and brushed away the fallen leaves. "I kept my promise," he said softly. "I'm living right. I help people now. I still miss you every day, but I finally understand what you meant by peace." The wind rustled through the branches above him. It felt like a whisper. He smiled. "I love you, Mom." That evening, as he walked home, the sun dipped below the horizon. The streetlights flickered on one by one. He reached our house, sat in the rocking chair, and looked at the photo on the wall. He traced the outline of my smile with his thumb and said, "You were right. Money fades, but love, it echoes." He leaned back, closed his eyes, and listened to the night. The creak of the chair was soft and steady. It almost sounded like a heartbeat. And somewhere in the quiet between one breath and the next, I felt it too. A mother's peace echoing forever in the home she built with her hands, her hope, and her heart. You think stories end when someone dies. They don't. Sometimes they start right there, in the silence after the last heartbeat. It had been a year since my mother passed. I still lived in her little house, the same one she fought her whole life to keep. Every corner whispered her name. The smell of lavender still clung to the curtains. The rocking chair still creaked at night, slow and steady, like it refused to forget her rhythm. I thought I knew every secret she'd left behind. But I was wrong. One quiet Sunday afternoon, I was cleaning the bookshelf when something slid loose. It was her red notebook, the same one I buried with her. For a second, my hands froze. How could it be here? Then I remembered. Walter had placed a copy in the casket and kept the original for safekeeping. He must have returned it without saying a word. I sat down, heart pounding, and opened it. Her handwriting filled every page, soft, looping letters, steady even near the end. The first pages were memories I already knew. But near the back, I found something I'd never seen before. An envelope taped to the inside cover. On it, in her shaky writing, "For when you finally understand." My throat tightened. I tore it open carefully. Inside was a folded letter and a small key. The letter began, "My dear son, if you're reading this, then time has done its work. I hope by now you've found peace in the quiet places. But there is something you must still learn. The money I lost to you was never the true loss. What broke me was the distance between our hearts. Still, I couldn't leave without giving you a final choice. The key in this envelope belongs to a safety deposit box downtown. Inside, you'll find what's left of the life I built, part savings, part memories, and something that belongs to you. What you do with it will show whether you've changed. Remember, redemption isn't proven by tears. It's proven by what you built after the tears dry." I held the paper against my chest. It felt warm, like her hand still guiding me. I whispered, "What did you leave for me, Mom?" The next morning, I went straight to the bank. The clerk looked at the key and nodded. She led me to a small gray room with metal boxes stacked like drawers in a morgue. When she opened mine, my hand shook. Inside was a brown envelope, a sealed jar, and a small leather pouch. I opened the envelope first. Inside were bank documents, a savings account still under her name. It held nearly $40,000. I blinked in disbelief. I thought she lost everything, but she'd saved more than I ever imagined. Then I noticed a note clipped to it. "This is not for you to keep. This is for you to give." I frowned. I opened the jar next. Inside were tiny folded notes, each dated and signed with her initials. The first said, "For the woman who taught me strength." The next, "For the boy who learns forgiveness." Dozens of them, small messages, like prayers in paper form. And at the bottom of the jar, another slip read, "Give my last savings to someone who reminds you of who you were, not who you became." I sat there a long time, staring at those words. She'd given me one more test. She wanted me to help someone the way she'd helped me. When I left the bank, the city looked different, clearer, brighter. Every stranger on the sidewalk felt like a possible sign. Who needed this money? Who deserved it? I didn't know yet. But I knew one thing: I wouldn't waste her final wish. That week at the community center, I met a boy named Malik. He was 12, thin, restless, and angry at the world. He reminded me of myself, the same fire, the same confusion. He'd been skipping school to help his mother clean houses. When I asked why, he said, "Because if I don't, who will? Grown-ups just leave." Something in me broke open. I started tutoring him after hours, math, reading, anything to keep him coming. His mother, Mrs. Reed, worked double shifts and barely slept. One night she came to pick him up, her eyes tired, hands cracked from detergent. She thanked me and said, "You don't know what this means to us." But I did. I'd seen those hands before on my mother. Weeks turned into months. Malik improved in school. He even talked about becoming an accountant one day. I laughed when he said it. "Careful," I told him. "It's not as exciting as it sounds." He grinned. "I just want to make enough so my mom never worries about bills." That night, I opened Mom's notebook again. Her words stared back at me. "Give it to someone who reminds you of who you were." I knew what she wanted me to do. The next morning, I withdrew all $40,000 from her account. I split it in two. Half went to open a college savings fund for Malik under his mother's name. The other half went anonymously to the community center that had saved me from myself. When the director called to ask who the donor was, I just said, "Someone paying a debt of love." For the first time in my life, I felt light, like a weight had finally lifted off my shoulders. Maybe that's what the redemption feels like. Not applause, not headlines, just quiet peace. A few days later, Malik brought me a drawing he'd made at school. It showed a woman with a scarf sitting in a rocking chair and a man standing beside her smiling. "That's you and your mom," he said proudly. I swallowed hard. "How did you know what she looked like?" He shrugged. "You talk about her a lot." I just imagined. I framed that drawing and hung it in the living room. Every time I looked at it, I felt her near me. One evening, I sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was orange and pink, the same colors I remembered from the day she passed. Brenda came over with 2 cups of tea. She was older now, slower, but her smile still kind. "You did what she asked, didn't you?" she said. I nodded. "She'd be proud, Jackson." I hope so, I said. Brenda looked toward the horizon. She always said love doesn't die. It just changes homes. I smiled. Then she's living in mine. That night, I opened the notebook again. A single page remained blank near the end. I picked up a pen and wrote my own words beneath hers. Mom, I gave the money. I helped the boy. I learned the lesson. You were right. Love is the only wealth worth keeping. Thank you for leaving enough light for me to follow. I closed the notebook and placed it on the shelf next to her photo. Months passed. The community center grew. Malik won a scholarship. He hugged me before leaving for high school and said, I won't let you down. I told him, don't do it for me. Do it for her. He nodded. I think she already knows. That winter, I finally visited Mom's grave again. Snow covered the ground like a white blanket. I brushed it away and laid down a single red flower. I did it, Mom, I whispered. I finally understand what you meant. You didn't want to punish me. You wanted to save me. The wind rustled the tree branches above. For a moment, I swore I heard the faint creak of her rocking chair. I smiled through tears. Life moved forward. I started a small financial literacy program for single mothers in the neighborhood. We met every weekend in the church basement. I called it Ellie's hands because that's what raised me. Her hands tired but gentle. We helped families learn to budget, save, and dream again. Each success story felt like another line written in her book. One woman, Maria, hugged me after paying off her first loan and said, I wish someone had done this years ago. I told her someone did. Her name was Ellie Price. Every evening I came home and talked to her photo like she could hear me. Sometimes I'd read her notes out loud to remind myself where I came from. Other times I'd just sit in silence, letting peace fill the room. I never remarried. I never left the house. It felt right to stay, like tending a garden she planted. One summer night, I woke to the sound of the wind rattling the windows. The house was dark except for moonlight spilling across the floor. And then I heard it again, the creak of the rocking chair. Slow, gentle, familiar. I smiled. Still keeping watch, huh? I whispered. The chair rocked once more, then stopped. The air felt warm, almost like a hand resting on my shoulder. I closed my eyes and drifted back to sleep with a smile. Years rolled by. I grew old. My hair turned gray. My hands looked like hers once did, lined, scarred, but kind. The neighborhood changed, but the house stayed the same. Children who once ran past my door were grown now. They still waved and called me Mr. J. Some brought their own kids to hear stories about the lady who taught you everything. I told them all she wasn't a saint. She was a mother, and that's enough. One rainy afternoon, Walter came to visit. He was even older than me now, walking with a cane. He looked around the house and smiled. You kept it just like she left it. I couldn't change a thing, I said. He handed me a small parcel. This was the last thing she asked me to give you when the time felt right. I frowned. After all these years, he nodded. She said you'd know what to do with it when you were ready. Inside was a faded photograph, me at 5 years old, asleep in her lap. On the back, she'd written, every mother's dream is to see her child resting, not running. If you're tired, rest now, my boy. I laughed softly, wiping my eyes. She really thought of everything. Walter squeezed my shoulder. She always did. That night, I sat in the rocking chair again, the photograph on my lap. Rain tapped the window softly. I thought about my life, the mistakes, the pain, the forgiveness, and I realized I wasn't scared of anything anymore. Not of dying, not of leaving. I looked up and whispered, Mom, I'm ready whenever you are. The house was silent. Then somewhere deep in the walls, the clock chimed midnight. I felt warmth spread through my chest, gentle and calm. I closed my eyes and saw her face smiling back at me. I don't know what happens after that. But I like to believe that when my heart stopped, I opened my eyes in the same kitchen where she once stood, making tea. She looked younger, strong again, wearing that blue scarf she loved. Welcome home, baby, she said. And I ran into her arms, laughing through tears. The next morning, neighbors found me in the rocking chair, peaceful, smiling. Beside me lay the red notebook, open to the final page. 2 lines in neat handwriting. Love doesn't end. It continues in the lives it touches. The story of a mother and son, finished not in pain, but in peace. Today, if you walk down Janyala Road in Sheikhupura or any street like it in America, you might find a small community center with a hand-painted sign that reads Ellie's Hands. Inside, mothers learn to budget, children learn to dream, and the walls are lined with framed words from a red notebook. People stop to read them, smile, and whisper, "She must have been some woman." And they're right. She was. Because sometimes the poorest woman in town leaves behind the richest legacy of all, love that teaches, forgives, and never truly dies. If you're still here listening, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And did this story remind you of someone you love? Don't forget to subscribe for more true life stories that touch the heart. And always remember, love is the only wealth that lasts forever.